In 2.1 we're going to do some actual algebra and solve for a variable. So in the first one that we have, let's say we have 4x minus 2 equals 2x plus 1. So what we want to do is get all of our numbers on one side and letters on the other. I like to keep the variable positive because a lot of people have trouble dividing by negative. So because 4 is bigger than 2, I'm going to move the 2x over to this side. So to do that, it is a plus 2x, so I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And since I'm moving my numbers to the left, I need to move my numbers to the right. Since I start with a minus 2, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. When I do this, I'm going to have 4x minus 2x, which is 2x. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, equals 2x minus 2x is 0. 1 plus 2 is 3. Now I have 2 times x, so the opposite of that is dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're just left with x equals 3 over 2. Okay, the next one is, let's say we have y plus 37 equals negative 13. Since we have a plus 37, that means I need to subtract it from both sides. We already have our y separated, so minus 37 minus 37. We're left with y. 37 minus 37 is 0, equals, we have negative 13 minus 37, so that means we have two that are the same sign. They're both negative, so we're going to add the two numbers and keep the negative sign. 13 plus 37 is 50. Next, let's say that we have x minus 61 equals negative 75. So the opposite of subtracting is adding. So I'm going to add 61 to both sides. X equals, now we have two numbers with opposite signs. That means we're going to subtract the bigger number minus the smaller number and keep the sign of the bigger number. So it's negative, and 75 minus 61 is 14. A way that you can always check all of these problems is by substituting your answer into the original equation. So let's do that on this one. I'm going to put negative 14 in for x. So negative 14 minus 61, does that equal negative 75? We have two negatives, that means we add and keep the negative. 61 plus 14 is negative 75, so we did this one right. If you need to, always check your answers, especially at the beginning here. Okay, the next is one with fractions. Let's say we have x minus 2 over 3 equals 5 over 6. So on this one, what I'm going to do is get rid of all of the fractions first. So to do that, what I'm going to do is look at all of the common, or all the denominators. We have a 1, a 3, and a 6. And the least common multiple of those is 6, because 1 will go into 6 and 3 will go into 6. So I'm going to multiply every single term here by 6. So that means 6 times x is 6x minus 6 divided by 3 is 2 times 2 is 4 equals 6 divided by 6 is 1 times 5 is 0. The reason I do this division first is because the whole point of doing this is to get rid of the fraction. And we're multiplying by a number that the denominator will divide into, so that there are no more denominators. So now to solve, I'm going to add the 4 to both sides. And I have 6x equals 9. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 6. and I'm going to get x equals 9 over 6, but I can simplify this to be x equals 3 over 2. Again, make sure you simplify. Okay, the next one I'm going to do has decimals, so x minus 0.47 equals negative 2.10. On this one, there's no real need to get rid of the decimal because we don't have a decimal that's involved with the x, so I'm just going to add the 0.47. We have x plus 0 equals, we have negative 2.10 plus 0.47, so we're going to have a negative. 0 minus 7 is 3. 10 minus 7 is 3. 10 minus 4 is 6. That's where our decimal will be, and we're left with a 1. So negative 1.63. Next, we have one that we're going to need to distribute some numbers. So we have 5 in parentheses, x minus 3, close the parentheses, minus 4x equals negative 10. So the first thing we need to do here is distribute the 5. So we're going to say 5 times x and 5 times negative 3. So we have 5x minus 15 minus 4x equals negative 10. Now we need to combine like terms on both sides. Make sure you always combine like terms on each side of the equal sign before you move something from one side to the other. So I have the 5x minus 4x, and that's just left with 1x minus 15 equals negative 10. I'm going to add the 15. And we get left with x, and negative 10 plus 15 is positive 5. So, kind of to backtrack, the steps for solving equations. First, get rid of fractions and decimals. We'll see some here where that's really necessary later on. Step 2 is distribute if needed. And same thing with number 1. If you don't have fractions and decimals, you can skip it. Then 3, isolate the variable. Actually, nope. Number 3, combine like terms. On each side of the equal sign. 4 is to isolate the variable. And that is using either adding or subtracting. And that's where you're moving something like all the numbers to one side of the equal sign and all the letters to the other side. And then the final step is to solve with multiplication or division, and that's where you have something like 5x equals 10 or x over 2 equals 5. On this one, you'll divide both sides by 5. This one, you'll multiply both sides by 2, and all you have is the variable on one side and just one number on the other. Okay, so there are going to be some word problems in this section. So let's say little Jared and Eddie are friends. Together, they have 127 video games. Jared has 29 more games than Eddie, how many do each have? So one way that we can put this is that Eddie equals X, and we see that Jared has, because we have no idea what Eddie has, but Jared is compared to Eddie. So we put Eddie as X, and Jared has 29 more, which means plus. So Jared equals X plus 29. Now when we add these two together, we get 127. So X plus 29 equals 127. Now we have it set up. And the first thing we need to do is combine like terms. So we'll get 2x plus 29 equals 127. Okay, so now we have all of our terms, or like terms combined. So we're going to subtract 29 from both sides. We're left here with 2x equals 127 minus 29 is 98. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 98 divided by 2 is 49. And so now that's what Eddie has. To find out what Jared has, we just add 29 to that. And we're going to get 78 for Jared. That's how you'll do these kind of questions. Remember that you're always going to have a plus in there, usually on these. Sometimes you might have a minus if you have something that says that something is less than. But you're going to have two basic terms. One of them will probably have two terms in it, like this one did. We had the X for Eddie and the X plus 29 for Jared. Some people do say Eddie plus Jared, and then they substitute in Eddie is X and Jared is X plus 29. Okay, then the next kind says Fred's dad is 6 years older than his mom. The mom is 40. How old is dad? Now this one, it's pretty easy just to figure out, but doing it mathematically, we know that the mom is 40. And he is plus 6, so that equals X. So 46 equals X. We could just say X is Fred's dad, and he is 40 plus 6. There's not really that much work to this one. Next, we see that the temperature today is 0.4 degrees higher than last night. The temperature now is 99. What was it last night? Okay, so right now, okay, so X, or actually we'll just say 99 is right now, and that equals, we don't know what last night was, so that's X, but we know that 99 is 0.4 higher, so we're going to add plus 0.4. So now we just need to subtract 0.4 from both sides, and we're going to get X equals 98.6 degrees. So that's it for section 2.1.